Started shortly. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will be getting started shortly. Hello, thank you for joining us. Before we pass this on to Kote and Mark, we just wanted to leave this slide up here for you. Spring One is right around the corner, December 6th through the 8th in San Francisco, where you can join other developers, app architects, and innovators and learn how they're using the latest tech to build the apps that keep the world humming. You will see a link in the bottom of the attachments page to register for Spring One and to learn more. All right, without further ado, let's pass this off to today's speakers.
Well, hello. Welcome to our webinar, Escaping the Legacy Trap, How to Modernize the Applications That Are Holding You Back. Hopefully by the end of this, you won't be held back so much, or at least you'll know how to unhold yourself or untrap yourself. Well, thanks for attending. I think we've got, I'm excited to go over this talk because I've been working on this with Mark for quite some time, and it'll be nice to kind of give an overview, a feel for what it is that we're doing with this. And, you know, what we're going to be going over today is a little, I think, essentially the legacy trap. And this is basically, as we'll get into, it's more of an executive's guide to thinking about tech debt and legacy software, application modernization, rather than just kind of even a enterprise architect or a developer level thinking about it, which hopefully will be useful for people out there. Now, I'll introduce myself briefly and then hand it over to Mark to introduce himself. This is me wearing a different shirt that I am currently. I'm on the developer advocate team, but I spend a lot of my time here at VMware in the Tanzu business unit, focusing on helping out managers and executives, people who are programming their organization rather than programming their applications, if you will. And most of the people I talk with are really interested in basically improving the way they do software to help their business out. And that brings in, as we'll get into a little bit, all sorts of other transformations with the technology they use and the process that they go over and things like that. But I want to let my co-author for this book, The Legacy Trap, introduce himself.
So thank you, Kote. I'm Mark. I work as global lead for application modernization at VMware Tanzu. As a kid, I badly wanted to become an archaeologist, and there was a phase later when I wanted to become an architect. And last year, I realized literally that I fulfilled those dreams of a kid in IT during the past 15 years, spending most of my time helping companies doing application archaeology, application modernization. This is literally the things I'm passionate about. I've done in many different roles as a developer, as an architect, as a trainer, as a tech lead, as a program lead. I've been supporting small firms, large firms to deliver application transformation at scale. Within VMware, most of my time, I'm spending it talking, working with executives, with customers to advise them on approach moving forward. And I'm refining, developing our techniques, our methodologies, our tools moving forward on the modernization side.
And you've been a great person to work on with this project. In fact, I think right when we first thought about writing up the legacy trap, I don't know, it was 2 years ago, wasn't it? I feel like it was, I remember I was standing in front of Schiphol Airport here in Amsterdam. So it must have been some moment when I think it was right when travel started back up at some point. Anyhow, but it's been great to work on you with this because, as you were saying, you have firsthand experience with it, and you have a lot of familiarity with the I don't know, the methodology and the thinking that a lot of our coworkers in Tanzu Labs have developed over the years, and also actually doing the work, talking with customers. And that's, you know, we're finally done with this, which is great. It's always nice to be done with something. I think you would agree. And I think we've come together to organize, again, like I was saying, hopefully it's only about 40 pages. We'll call it a book because why not? But it's a short book, a pamphlet. And the desire with it is that it's a digestible, maybe even a little entertaining to read sometimes, overview of why paying attention to your legacy software, your existing software is valuable. And I think we managed to do it, Mark. I don't know. What do you think?
Definitely, I think we managed to do what was the initial thought of the book. So for my end, I realized recently that I spent most of my time in the past 3.5 years talking with a lot of customers. And I would say every other week I talked with a CTO, CIO, head of application development. And I realized that for every one of them, this legacy trap was a core reality, so to say. They had similar issues. They were worried about the similar things happening that they were fighting against, that we described in the book. Sometimes at a portfolio level, with all the applications being kind of stuck on struggling to move forward, moving to the cloud, making them more modern. Sometimes one monolithic application on. I think we really definitely achieved our goal to save our readers a lot of time, understanding good practices, what are false good ideas, trying to share the wisdom from the past and from all those discussions on engagements we have had also within VMware, within Tanzu. If I would be 10 years ago, I would be delighted to have like this little booklet and start reading it, learning about all those traps on how to get out of that, sharing in a way kind of those some eye openers, breaking away from those prejudice you might have about what modernization is, what is its reality, how software goes bad, what are the most efficient way of getting out of this trap. So I think we fulfilled our contract, and I'm really happy that we are like you. So far with that book on that we have to the point of sharing it with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and if you're interested, you can click on there's always a collection of links you can click on when you're watching this. You can download it, or you can go to that URL or use that QR code if you want to download it right now. I suggest you download it multiple times. That's always nice. And we'll have a link to it at the end, obviously, as well. And so kind of the part of the book that I focused on the most is really like I would call it, I don't know, about the first half or so, or the first third. And that was making the case that this is an important thing to pay attention to, that if you're in an organization where you either want to, you need to, or you are using your own software that you build and run on your own as like, I don't know, I would say a core part of how your business or your organization runs, if you're in the not-for-profit world of organizations, so to speak, that what you'll find is that you can do a lot of great application development and great software if you're kind of starting from nothing, if you're in what people would call a greenfield. But after about the first year, or maybe even so, what you're going to find in a large existing organization is that you hit this, that we could have called the book the legacy wall, but you hit this wall that you bounce off of and fall into the legacy trap. How do you like that one, Mark? Is that, did I work that one out?
Absolutely.
All right. and I think evidence of that, there's a survey that I think we worked on here at VMware with Forrester. I think it's a couple years ago now, but it's kind of studies this and asks several executives. And this is the point, like when I read the survey at first, it really started piquing this interest in me. And that is that when surveyed, like a little over 75%, 76% of executives were basically saying that their legacy software was holding them back from accomplishing their business needs. I mean, there's a good quote from a retail executive in there, right? Where that retail executive is essentially saying that, like, I want to evolve my software and add new features, but I keep spending time on this stuff I don't care about, like maintenance and backend things like that. And so I think, as Mark was saying, like anecdotally, whenever you talk with someone, most everyone that you talk with, they have this issue, right? And again, to reiterate the point, because this is why I think it's so important to kind of have this executive level focus, is I think one of the primary reasons this trap exists is because it doesn't have awareness and attention at the high enough level in an organization to kind of drive it as a priority. And so that gets to, the effects that the legacy trap has, right? So what does it mean to be held back by the legacy trap, that wall that you have there, and what does it look like, right? What's the nature of it? And again, think about the goal that you have. Mark and I came up with a exciting little fairy tale in the insurance industry involving, what was it, Warm Smiles Mid-Atlantic Insurance, and then I think it was like Midwestern Reassuring Pats on the Back, their competitor. But it's a representative story of the situation that organizations are in, where they want to introduce new ways of doing business driven by software. And so when they try to do this, if they're trapped in this legacy trap, they find that they have a tremendous amount or too much technical debt. And essentially what technical debt is, I mean, this is one of I would say, the most deeply covered aspect of what legacy is, right? It's been covered at least since 2000, kind of formally, when Michael Feathers came out with this great book about legacy code. But essentially what it means is that your existing infrastructure, the existing services that you use, for whatever reasons, you can't change them or integrate with them as fast as you need to. Like there's some reason why you can't actually use them at the new speed that you want. And you kind of get into this trap because I was just making a joke about this with my wife this morning to make an analogy about it. Like we ordered a package of 24 eggs, and I was in a hurry this morning, and the eggs were still in the package, and I was thinking I really should unpack these eggs and put them in the container, because next time when I want to use these eggs, I'm going to have to pop this container open again, and it's going to be annoying. And I didn't, because I was in a hurry. And sure enough, I came back to use the eggs, and this egg debt had accumulated that now I had a new step, a new thing that was holding me back from achieving my egg glory and satisfaction. But more realistically, you see things like this where, because you haven't maintained and updated not only your own software, but the things you depend on, you're hindered by it when you really, in situations where you need to use it most. And, there's other attributes that definitely we kind of cover and explain in the book. And, one of the technical things that came in that kind of Feathers era of early understanding is that I think one of the more interesting things of figuring out what code you have is to see what your test coverage is, right? And essentially any test or system that you have that isn't tested, that doesn't have tests running for it, is probably some legacy system. And, that's kind of a developer's viewpoint. But really, just think about any time as a manager, an executive, or even a developer that you feel like there's something easy that should be doing. The developers are saying it will just take them 15 minutes, but then for some reason it ends up taking them 2 or 3 months. There's some kind of legacy trap involved there. Do you think we hit upon the items there, Mark? Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we combine all those things together, most of the companies we engage with are feeling a little like this little person in this hole. Basically, this idea of a trap is that all those things are accumulating and they can't move to a point where they cannot further develop, where they're literally locked in a situation where the application can't move forward, where at the end, the software, it's not only that they're in a legacy situation for the current software, but the debt is so high that they're not in a position of moving forward. And you mentioned this test coverage very often. While moving out of such a trap, one of the prerequisites is to figure out that you have the same functionality. So having such a test of validation that the software is working in a specific way is absolutely crucial. And it's all those factors combined together make it extremely tough just to move away and to just drive the business forward in any way.
And I think you raise up something that I want to make sure to make the point of, which is, and this testing point, the reason why this testing is important is because of the nature of software. Like, it's easy to make what seems like a simple change in software that has unintended consequences and messes up the rest of your software, right? This is a very common thing to happen. and that is why having a lot of testing, right? No matter how small the change that you have, it's very important to verify that you haven't messed up something else that you weren't even thinking about. And I think that's why it's not like the perfect thing, but one of the first things to look at is the amount of testing that you have, because that will drive a lot of the fear and reluctance of changing software, and good fear and reluctance, because you need to be able to verify changes that you had there. So we went over a little bit of what I would call like the smells of legacy, right? Like what it looks like and feels like. And I think it's worth, as we also do in the book, diving into, I think the most common reasons that software goes bad, right? Because, software on its own isn't like, wonderful cheese or a great cut of meat or some mushrooms, right? Like it doesn't rot. Like software, given the right, energy, as long as the software is running, it doesn't degrade, essentially, right? And so, like, how is it that if software was good at some point that it goes bad, metaphorically? And I think there's three main things to highlight. And one of them that we've already highlighted is, let's call it the fitness of the software. And what that means is the capabilities that it has, and not only the capabilities to, like, let's use our insurance example, for example, estimate or come up with a premium cost, what you're going to charge people to be covered by insurance based on whatever the demographics are, right? I mean, that's a very important capability for insurance companies. But then it's also the fitness of being able to do that performant-wise, right? Like being able to actually do it in a speedy enough way and be reliable, right? And as I've already covered, there's also the capabilities that the software has. And the example that I often think of here is, and it's an older example, but you can hopefully appreciate it, is at some point in the late 2000s, most all of the software out there needed the capability of running on a mobile device, right? And I remember we've kind of forgotten this and take it for granted, but that was a big deal, right? To kind of like reformat or even rewrite your UIs and your front ends, not only the UI layer to work mobile, but also that the backend could support that amount of activity. So you have that capability. And then finally, and this one is what you most often hear about it with mainframes, but it happens with all types of software, is that people, they kind of have forgotten how the software works, what its architecture is and what it does. And this is both as you use older software languages and technologies, just the people who knew how to do it get promoted, as they probably should, to higher levels of position, and they no longer code. They move on to other positions, or as hopefully will happen with many of us in the future, they're able to retire and enjoy all that delicious cheese and mushrooms and steak and things like that for whatever they're doing. But again, I think it's really important, if you're not familiar with like legacy problems, to understand that these are kind of the primary ways that software goes bad, because then it allows you to start thinking about, well, long-term, how we can prevent that, but equally importantly, how you can start to remediate and deal with the software that you have. And, when it comes to thinking about, all right, like, it'll be great in the future for us to not get caught in this trap. There's all sorts of good behaviors we can do. But again, like those 76% of people, what you're going to encounter is that in the here and now, you want some way to address it. And, in the book, and this is where Mark really helped out with kind of pulling this together and getting a new cut at this concept, is always in application modernization. I think it might have been Richard Watson at Gartner who came up with the first cut of this, and there was 5 of them. But everyone in the industry has tried to be clever about coming up with a certain number of R's, right? And I think the cleverness is warranted. It's not just some over cleverness. And if you look at this, so these are kind of rated again, as we'll get into, from this interesting way of thinking about it strategically, about the effort you put in and the payoff that you're going to get and the risk that you're taking on from doing it. But there are 7 different R's that we've written up in the book. And again, these are things that have been circulating around in the industry for a while. So we by no means think that we are the geniuses who came up with them. We're just the geniuses for telling you about them and trying to educate you and help you. But, you can, just to go through them really quickly, because I think you'll get a better idea if you read the book. But you can essentially, the first option for fixing a problem is always to do nothing. which is essentially retaining it, right? Which might be, after some analysis, that might make sense. And if you're not using it anymore, it's also good to retire it, right? Like, there's a lot of code around there that is just not needed anymore. And so you've got to do that analysis. Now, a very popular and a totally valid thing to do, if it makes sense, is rehosting it, right? And this is where you're not really changing the way the software works. You're just running it and operating it and kind of adding stability by moving the platform, the infrastructure that it's running on. And you do have to verify that, but it's a lot, just because it's almost like you're not really improving the way your family functions, you're just moving to a new house, right? You're replatforming to a new area, but you're still going to have to work on improving your family and making your family great. It's a strange analogy, but I'll proceed. And then finally, or not finally, but next, above that infrastructure layer, like the data center that you're running it in, whether you're running it in public cloud, thing kind of at that lower level, there are other components as you get closer and closer to the application layer that you can start to swap out. And this is where a lot of work has been going on in the cloud native space over the past few years, where, moving from, it could be bare metal of all things, your own managed servers, to moving from a kind of a monolithic VM-driven architecture, moving to a container-based architecture, to a Kubernetes-based architecture, maybe even to serverless. Like, there's all these new platforms out there and ways that you can run your applications that will give you new capabilities if you want to change things around, but also add this kind of runtime stability to it, which is the replatform. And then the last two, is there's refactoring, which again, think about how you're progressing closer and closer, even though we have it in the opposite order here, but you're progressing up towards the application layer. And refactoring it's a word from the mid 2000s, early 2000s, from this great book that Martin Fowler wrote, that essentially says there are ways of improving your code of your software without changing the behavior that the software has, even the UI that it has, but you can rewrite the internals, right? It's, I think back to my first car was this great 1980 powder blue Monte Carlo. And I'm sure it would be a clunker and a terrible car now, but if you just kept the shell and replaced all the innards, it would be a fantastic car for me to drive around. And that's kind of what refactoring is, right? You're not really changing the behavior or what the software looks like, but you're improving the insides of it. And there's, with all of these, there's a little bit of change that you can sometimes add. And then, finally, you get to the area, a part of refactoring is also rewriting the software. And this is where you go beyond the regular refactoring and you actually start reimagining at the extreme end, or just kind of rewriting things that are in there, right? So even like a mobile interface is a bit of rewriting, or you might just come up with an entirely new workflow for the software. And then another one that is, I think, very popular nowadays that can be very valuable is you may conclude that it makes no sense to do this with your own software. And you can just come up with a, as we used to say, off the shelf, or increasingly a SaaS way of doing this, and you can replace that. And so these are the tactical things that you can do once you've identified software, as we'll get into, and they're kind of like the options that you'll have. they're the end result that you'll get to.
Absolutely. And if you just stay one back, so I think what I love in this option is stated that way. You see very clearly it doesn't make sense for every single application to make it absolutely perfect. So to refactor, to rewrite, to replace every single application to become its perfect self. I was just, as you described this option, that it reminded me my time at the university, where we had a formula to determine when should I rewrite software versus refactor or retain, and things like that. At the end, you will get more value the more effort you put in. And not every single application needs to be completely rewritten, turned into its better self. And what we see here, those options, is, I would say, one dimension of modernizing, and it's only, I would say, one seen from the more technical side of things. What we realize is, to be really successful, so to say, an effective at doing that, applying the same old patterns, contributing to create this legacy applications, it does not work anymore. So this means that, to quote Einstein, the only way moving forward is to try to find a different thinking to modernize our application, to get out of the trap, than what the thinkings that contributed to creating the trap, to put complete organizations with hundreds of applications being massive, monolithic in this very difficult situation, so to say. The clear realization of that is that to be addressed, we need to have a holistic approach to get out of the traps. It's not only something that is purely technical. And I would say the biggest efforts that I've seen companies investing moving forward are all about adopting a new ways of doing software, adopting a new culture, the way a startup would develop software, moving fast, starting small, scaling fast, adopting a generative way of thinking, empowering the employees to speak out on do some experiments, validate software following some small analytics and experience, adopting methodologies that are not only great to develop from scratch and turn ideas, validate those ideas into great software, but also applying the very same methods of user-centered design, lean product management, extreme programming, cloud native practice, and so on and so forth to existing software. And on top of this methodology layer, it's a great idea to use tools helping to increase the productivity of every single developers, operators, to in the same amount of time be able to achieve more ideally on a platform that is fully transparent to the end users, providing different levels of abstraction, that is portable across cloud, on-premise, hybrid type of environment, highly standardized moving forward. On the whole modernization, get out of this legacy trap, we found out that it needs to be holistic. Just addressing it purely at this pure technical level won't help. As a little spoiler, moving forward, basically doing that is really super hard. It's so easy, to just talk about Kubernetes, about technology, about containers, about adopting Kafka on some of the coolest and greatest framework in the world. Driving at scale a cultural change, adopting those beautiful, powerful startup methodologies moving forward is a different matter. If we just take a few steps back, so to say, we have seen a lot of different themes coming together on how large companies go out of this little trap. So if you have a look at a timeline from the moment they started and decided to go out of the trap, and have a look at the amount of applications they modernize and bring to this new modern world, there are three main steps, so to say, moving forward. The first one is all about trying to figure out what is the best possible strategy moving forward, so to say. So basically, what are what is the target stack technology-wise they want to use? What are the landing zones? Do they want to go to the cloud, on-premise, a mix of those? How far they want to transform from all those 7 areas that Michael just presented? Which one is the most fitted? Which one should be applied to which application forward? On last but not least, figuring out where to start when you have 2,000 applications, as we have worked on with some of our largest customer in the aerospace industry or in the car industry. Out of the 2,000, what are the one we should focus our efforts, so to say, to drive on the world transformation at scale? And from there, it's all about starting to identify and work on some pilots, transforming applications, components of existing legacy applications on a project-to-project basis, learning from that, starting to build a competency center to then, in a next last step, so to say, scale forward on so to say, apply the beauty of everything that has been done to the rest of the organization, to the rest of the application portfolio. On what I found really interesting is you see those 3 steps being very consequently executed by all organizations going through such a large transformation holistically. And for us, the whole journey often starts with just figuring out what we want to achieve. So from an outcome perspective, trying not to figure out which technologies we want to add to this existing super complex legacy set of applications, but really starting to make 1-2 step backs on figuring out basically what do we want business-wise want to achieve by getting out of this trap, by modernizing our applications. where we start is typically having a look at those different things displayed here. So very often we hear only about, the whole discussion starts, and it's a little bit annoying, start just about saving money. It's all about trying to figure out way to reduce costs, to be more efficient. On what I tend to say in the discussion I had with the executives is, I don't know any single company who has been blossoming business-wise by just saving money. Maybe you know some of those, Michael Cote. On my end, I've never seen that, and it's very often more about than just money, on just being more frugal, but about finding the best possible way to leverage those additional resources we have in terms of times or effort to be able to be more successful, to differentiate ourselves. What I've seen emerging a lot in the discussion is this will to shine, to as a company, to position ourselves as a talent magnet, so to say, in the corresponding industry, maybe in an industry where it's tough to recruit, to differentiate against the competition, to make the whole business more attractive, to have more happy, more efficient teams. What is very often making the business case also from a, I would say, completely, is something I would tie to speed, where this whole modernization is all about being able to reduce the time to market, to have a release of a product, I would say every 4 weeks or 4 days instead of 4 months. Moving forward faster, also on the side of the development, by developers being fully focused on what they do rather than having to reinvent the wheel, having to take care of the environment, ticketing, managing systems, and so on and so forth, and also from in the innovation side of things. And on top of that, the core motivation we have seen for large companies to move out of this legacy trap are also to be able to benefit fully from modern world, from a technological perspective, to be more scalable, to adapt dynamically on the demands, to expose and trail the hurt of the application to the rest of the world, to millions of users, to increase the stability of the system, to be more secure, to be in a position where they very quickly and proactively make their whole environment safer. I don't know if that resonates with the discussions that you have had, Cote, with.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just as one thing about, like, it's always fun when I hear about the craft of creating a little book. And so for one thing, like, this model of the S's, as you can see, another model where everything starts with the same letter. But it's also a good way, as is done here, to kind of start with thinking about the business case, or the, you know, kind of the business case for what you're doing, right? It's interesting to use these as metrics that you use. But, you know, when we were writing this, you know, this is one of the nice things that for me about writing this with Mark is, I tried to edit out the shine part. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm too cynical, but like, that sounds like a bunch of like culture stuff. But I think in going over it with him and thinking about it, like, it really is, especially at a management executive layer, right? Like, one of the things that you are in charge of, and that people who are trying to improve the organization are in charge of, is exactly making a good organization, which is hard to put into a spreadsheet. But you definitely can feel when an organization's culture, their way of working, the people there are not only happy, but they have an effective set of principles that allows them to figure out what to do when things are maybe not going so well, or figuring out how to achieve the outcome that they want, right? And that may seem like a lofty thing to attach application modernization to, but again, to use a domestic analogy here, right? Like, if your house is like messy and like has flickering lights and you haven't unpacked your eggs from the carton, like, I don't know about you, but I'm just going to get grumpy. And so, like, it's worth putting in that time to keep things well maintained and in a good state, because it'll allow you to focus on good things, which exactly translates to this shining that you'll find in your organization.
Absolutely, and I'm so happy that you have not edited out and that you have thinking about this shiny too.
Exactly.
But as you notice, basically, this is really at the heart of the starting point to go out of this legacy trap. It sounds super simple, but it makes a tremendous difference just to focus on that have clarity about those goals that could be then turned in objective and key results, and so on and so forth. Everything in the book about the details, to then have a look at two levels on moving forward. One level is a portfolio level, with all those applications, trying to figure out, like the strategy I mentioned before, what to do with which application, on very quickly, not in years, but in a few weeks, be able to have this strategy, validate it, iterate on it. And the second level is at the level of one single massive, majestic, monolithic application. And if you go one next, you will see one of our core approach to do it at a portfolio level. So we have been doing that for a while with many large customers having hundreds, thousands of applications. On the core ideas, the core principles of what we do is very similar to what Eisenhower has invented with his matrix in terms of time management to escape the urgency trap, if you will, by figuring out your task and your to-dos or what you want to do, which one are important, not important, and which one are urgent, not urgent, and ending every one of your activities and tasks and things you have to do in one of those four categories, to then have a simple decision framework about what to do with which of your to-dos. And so which one you are going to do first, which one are you going to delegate, which one are you going just to eliminate or reschedule. And if we use the very same essence of that to build a form of impact effort matrix for your application portfolio, and align the modernization effort against those true outcomes, so this business case you want to achieve, figuring out from a business side of things in a quantified manner against the goals, the savings, the stability, the speed you want to achieve, what is going to be the impact on the business by transforming your little application being those little bubbles here. And on the other axis, trying to figure out on an automated way, using different tools or methods, figuring out how tough it's going to be, what type of investment you will have to do to be able to go so far. And this helps to cluster applications, to group them, to also formulate a super nice strategy moving forward in a short time, and then iterate moving forward. And there is way more detail about that in the books. We have worked with large companies having hundreds of those applications, where in a few weeks we managed to provide them a path forward about which application should go to the cloud or not, which one should be just lift and shifted, which one would be great to be rewritten from scratch moving forward. So this is one of the two aspects. So at the portfolio level, to give you a little bit a teaser, an impression about what we are going to describe in the book. On the second level is more subtle, and I think it's also the one where I'm seeing most of the requests in the discussion I have with executive, is at the level of single application. So to say, when we have one of those super large monolithic applications, a traditional approach we see so many times moving away from those large applications is to try to rewrite it, is starting with something we call an analysis paralysis. So especially I'm just thinking of one of the first customer I've been working on that specifically topic 3.5 years ago. One of the largest software vendor in Europe. They have 2,000 developers, and they spent 10 months to try to figure out what's going to be the perfect plan, the perfect meta model for the new applications that they're going to release, and how it's going to look like. And they were just turning around in doing circles, not really being able to move forward for this extremely complex application with hundreds of modules, hundreds of developers, leveraging petabytes of data, coming to the limits of the underlying technologies, and so on and so forth. On the biggest problem was that they were not able to find a proper way to move forward. They were kind of in this very trap that we describe, and they were too afraid to make a leap of faith to move forward instead of capitalizing on false good ideas, and to help you to move forward. Exactly in our little book, we have consolidated together all possible ideas you could encounter to move away from this trap of such a situation of a monolithic application. So in this little diagram where you will read and see way more in the book, you will see I would say 6 of the major approach that we have identified and seen over the year on how to modernize existing applications. On the horizontal axis, you see the duration of the approach, typical time it takes. On the vertical axis, you get some better feeling for the business impact the transformation has on the application, on typically on what type of modernity you land on, if the application is more cloud native or close to a legacy system. So you would see, for example, that just doing some rehosting of existing application will be quick, but it won't bring much in terms of business value. Automating the code translation of your existing applications is going to take a little bit longer, but won't bring you further because it won't change fundamentally the core architecture of your applications, making it more flexible, more secure, more scalable, and so on and so forth. Repurchase is a really good and interesting one because it could take really a lot of time if you want to replace an existing legacy system just by buying something else. Of course, you could end at a level where your application is way more modern. However, depending on where you stand, it could be a very heavy investment. In fact, I've been working for a while with a large software car vendor in Germany, having a mainframe system, and they spend months also to figure out how far they could move away from the existing mainframe to SAP, to Oracle systems. And they realized that it would take way more time and efforts to just customize that to SAP and to any other system rather than just rewrite the system on their own. On the last one you see on the top right, this waterfall right, is, from my experience, the most expensive one, the toughest one, brings you the highest benefits, but very often it's kind of unrealistic as you spend a lot of time just specifying the whole existing system that has been developed typically over 10, 20, 30, 50 years, following the very same approach. In a little book, you will see all rationale behind the classification of those different transformation, where they are in those little curves, on where we go a little bit deeper on something we think is a real deal to escape the legacy trap, to change the culture, to change the method, to change the mindset you have within the organization to do software, on turn to something looking more like a Silicon Valley startup, being this more iterative way of rewriting software called Swift, that helps many of our customers to escape that trap. From a large governmental institution in Europe, having mainframe that they have developed over years, and tried over decades several times just to get out of this mainframe without success, to large software vendors in Europe, to banks in Asia, to all kinds of institutions in the US, definitely go out of this legacy trap. So on the next slide, you will see from a high-level perspective how this whole process is looking like. Starting with an alignment on this business case, establishing a common shared understanding on what we want to achieve business-wise, and using that in a way as a compass to navigate the whole transformation process, applying one method after the other to understand from a business perspective very simply what the application is doing today, which is very often one of the biggest challenge companies have, because there might not be much knowledge about those applications, to then try to figure out if you would be today a Netflix, a Meta company, Google, Apple, any fintech company, how would you today write this one application from scratch? How would this notional architecture from the new application look like? And then turn that progressively in a backlog of work apply existing cloud native patterns to turn that into code and start iterating on it. We have written and condensed everything around those different steps, taking in a few weeks just through a few iterations on where we have seen, I would say, within 10 to 12 weeks, the full process done, bringing existing part of those legacy application in production, even for the most complex and integrated mainframe, so to say. So Coté, you also have been in touch with some of those customers going through this whole process. Well, do you have anything to add in that regard?
Yeah, I think, well, so one, hopefully what you, our dear watchers can see here is that what's going on here is adding a very focused strategic angle to everything, right? And that's what I like about the Swift method and a lot of the thinking that Mark's gone over is it answers the question, but is this valuable to do? Right? And I think that is really easy in the traditional way you think about software to overlook, because you follow more of this project mentality where as the IT department, as the developers, you're just sort of told what to do and not expected to be told it's valuable or to understand that value, right? And so I think when modernizing stuff, making sure you're bringing that analysis for value is in there as well. And I think the other thing when I've talked with organizations and when I do now who are modernizing the way they do things, right? To highlight another thing Mark said, this ability, this idea of how can we structure this so that we can start quickly and start moving and doing things, right? And the answer isn't that, you're going to do everything you thought you were, just faster. The answer is that you're going to do less more frequently, right? And you're going to go through this iterative cycle. But what's important there is that you start, right? Like this is overstating it, but it's almost the most important thing is to actually start. And I think that's the other thing that's really great that you kind of see illustrated here in the Swift method is it is a method that is built around this iterative notion that you're starting soon and you're refining what you're doing, right? And this really is the core thing that I was most excited to document in the book is really to kind of go over what this method is, because we don't have the pictures of people standing up with Post-it notes and doing the event storming and, all of the stuff that we kind of detail of how this is done here. But it's very effective. Like, it works, which I always find a delight when it comes to computers and the way that things operate here. And so I think, I think you've kind of covered, we've covered everything you think, don't you think, Mark? We've gone over what we need to.
Absolutely. So maybe one last thing I would love to add, I think, so we have, as you noticed it in this little book, we have covered a wide range of subjects, but those are, from my very experience working really for 15 years on modernization, what is making the biggest difference between a good project and a project that is really thriving, because it brings at the end super happy people from the side of the business. Also, it turns and transforms holistically the developers in a new mindset in the way they develop. They transform existing software and have the feeling of just creating from scratch a new startup, so to say, with the existing bits that they have. So really lifting up the whole development chain of the applications. I'm super glad that we managed to put all those things together. At the end, really the essence of what makes a huge difference to be successful in such modernization projects, and go away from those this blocked situation, where at the end the time spent is just on running the application rather than continue to develop it, to build it, to expand
to evolve it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with that, I mean, there's, as we keep alluding to, obviously we would love it if you went and checked out the book, downloaded it, and kind of read through it. And it's something that I think, I mean, I'll speak for both of us. You can tell we're always interested and passionate about talking with people about it. It's really it's nice. Like, I mean, what I always think when we're talking about improving enterprise software is like, I use a lot of enterprise software, right? And so I'm always interested in everyone getting better at it because it's going to improve my life. And especially when it comes to modernizing software, whether it's in, especially in government agencies, I use frequently, in commercial agencies, everything. There's always, I appreciate when the software improves there. And so, as I said, you can go to this URL, you can access it in the associated links we have here, do the QR code, whatever, so you can download the booklet and read it for free. And I also want to highlight, in a kind of lower than a little bit lower than an executive layer, there's another type of legacy trap that I always like to mention that I've developed. I shouldn't say developed. I actually just took ideas, as always, from some of my coworkers and wrote it up a little bit. But there's another idea when it comes to developer productivity that we like to think of as developer toil. And similarly, the reason why I want to recommend you check out this developer toil paper is because it's one of those things where, like, often you hear that developer productivity is bad, and then you're kind of left with like, so now what do I do? and what I like about the methodology we use here is it actually has a very concrete series of next steps to start to figure out what to do, right? Again, just as with the Swift method, to actually start doing something, no matter how small, so that you achieve momentum to launch with it. But I think these two papers go really well together, and hopefully, as you will do, I'm sure, dear watchers, when you download them and read through them, I think our hope is that, again, you can get started on fixing this stuff by understanding a new way of thinking about it, why the software kind of goes bad, and as Mark emphasized many times, that it's especially if you're in charge of an organization or you're a manager or an executive, it's not only the software that you're modernizing, but you're modernizing the organization and the way that it operates. And I think that is key to long-term success with escaping and staying out of the legacy trap. Do you have any last words you want to add in, Mark?
Yeah, maybe just the recognition that something you might have heard so many times, that the software you build today is going to be the legacy of tomorrow. And I think going through those little ebook, those documents, it will help you to make the software you build today more timeless, to prevent it to become bad, so to say. And I think
right.
For me, discovering the methods that have been developed in those books has been an incredibly pleasure, so to say. It was super interesting, and I hope that you will have as much enjoyment, so to say, going through that and discovering those methodologies, those thoughts. I would love to hear back from you what you think about the ideas there to exchange about it.
Well, great. Well, thanks for checking this out, and you can look at that stuff pretty easily, and we'll talk with.
Just want to say thank you to Cote and thank you for Mark for that presentation. Thanks to all of you guys for joining us today. All the links that were presented in this talk, you can view in the attachments tab. There's a link directly to the Legacy Trap ebook if you'd like to view that yourself. And again, like you see here on screen, you may be able to meet Mark and Cote in person at Spring One, taking place this year in San Francisco from December 6th through the 8th. You'll also find a link to the bottom of the attachments page where you can view that event as well. Thank you all. We hope to see you at our next event. And just a note, this has been recorded and will be available on demand shortly after the end of this presentation. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.